Think about a buyer of any kind of business. Do they want something hard or do they want something easy? And very often, if you're pretty small, you've been doing all the work and you start to unlock the first step towards that SaaS valuation versus a services valuation of pretty much, nothing.
All right, you beautiful, amazing, sexy motherfuckers. I have really, to me, somebody who's like a living legend. Raj Jha is here, and Raj I met in the attorney space in 2016, and he's really a lot more than an attorney. He's one of the smartest guys I know. He's really an entrepreneur playing the part of an attorney. And one of the things that I've said for a long time is the actual best stuff about running an agency, I learned more for attorneys. Like Raj really opened up my mind to the idea that stop chasing these little $5,000-$10,000 clients and start going after, in his case, the Yahoos and the big kind of tech giants. But in our case, like actually going after the top 1% of the market and stop like being like everybody else and having all the competition in the middle. And the reason I wanted to invite Raj in here is especially going to be interesting for those of you guys who are in web development and design and things like that, because he's kind of cracked the code on creating enterprise value. And we'll get into that in a second. Let's firstly, let me give you the grand welcome, Raj. Thanks for being here and doing this.
Thanks, Frankie. And also, he didn't mention I also ran an agency and sold one after that. So that's another piece of the puzzle. And the stuff that Frankie's telling you is the absolute truth. I started out and I was literally taking clients for like $595 a month. Like that was like my original. And then I was like, this is the dumbest thing ever. So I leapt to $5,000 a month, $19,000 a month. I just keep on going up and up and up. And you can do this. So
Yeah.
For Frankie, listen to Frankie. He's right.
Yeah. Well, I learned it from you. So he's just saying he's right. It's really, really true. And a lot of times it's not even doing something different. It's changing who you're doing it for. One of the things that I wanted to bring you on for today is we had this kind of talk, and maybe you could elaborate on this, but we have so many people like doing web designs and web development. And one of the challenges, it's basically like a zero enterprise value business, meaning like 10 years from now, you've been creating all these websites, you have all this client flow, and you decide you want to sell it. And it's essentially, you find out that nobody will pay you anything for it. And even if they will, they want you to be their employee for the next 2 or 3 years. Whatever, you just kind of elaborate on that challenge and what a lot of folks will find at the end of that kind of journey if they decide they want to sell their agency.
Yeah, you're 100% right. So agencies are services businesses, and services businesses are hard businesses. Like anyone's watching this, it's a hard business, right? So think about a buyer of any kind of business. Do they want something hard or do they want something easy? And very often, if you're pretty small, you've been doing all the work. And since you can't, there's no slavery anymore, so you can't sell you as part of the business. So really, have you built anything if you spent all of those years doing the work and there's no separation between you, the person, and the business itself? If the two are the one and the same, and if you left for a month and the whole thing would collapse, if you left for even a quarter, a year, and the whole thing would collapse, you haven't created any enterprise value. That means your business has no value separate from you. So the key is to start thinking about your business as something separate from you, and how do you build that value? Because it needs to be more than just the labor, because this labor theory of value is kind of the same as what an employee is, right? You work, you get paid, versus a business owner, which is I've created something of inherent value.
Yeah, and that's an amazing kind of insight into that. And we were talking a little bit about the Scorpion model, is that sometimes little 5-degree kind of shifts in the business actually open up like real enterprise value. Like nobody wants to buy a service business where the owner is the business, but there's little tweaks you can make where just in your setup and structure where suddenly it has like a whole lot more value. I'd love to hear just your thoughts on how you see that playing out for some of our web development folks.
Yeah. So first, just conceptually, there's kind of a pyramid of value, right? At the bottom is these just pure services business, the kinds we talked about that are unsellable. And then above that, you add systems and processes, and you get to a process-based services business, so a productized service. And then above that is intellectual property. And intellectual property is kind of the holy grail of business ownership, because that's when you start to think, oh, all these SaaS companies that are sold for 10x revenue, not profit, 10x revenue, or these ways that you can license intellectual property and get an annuity coming back to you because of something you created. So the question is, how can you ascend that pyramid and go from really just doing the work to having something that's different from yourself, that's a process, then to having some asset which has a lot of leverage associated with it. So the Scorpion model was they started out doing this basic web development. And then they realized, well, wait a minute, if I make a platform, so it's really easy to deploy these websites at scale in the legal market, then they can kind of push one button and then a whole bunch of updates happen. Or they can manage a whole bunch of stuff with a lot of leverage. So they realized that. And then they realized, oh, wait a minute, this works in legal. Maybe I should try real estate. Maybe I should try a whole bunch of other markets. So they went into other markets because they had this platform now. And the platform enabled a huge amount of growth and enterprise value, because now they go to a client and instead of doing the work to custom build everything, they've got this repetitive code they can use. And a lot of development agencies, web dev agencies, even mobile app agencies, they're kind of doing that, right? You've got your bag of tricks and you're pulling it out each time, but you haven't done the next step, which is make it into a platform that someone else could use, even if they're not using it, even if you're tech-enabled services. Make it into a true platform, and you start to unlock the first step towards that SaaS valuation versus a services valuation of pretty much nothing.
Zero. Zero and
zero. I'm trying to be nice and say pretty much nothing. It's nothing.
Yeah. No, but it's true, right? Like, and that's kind of amazing. And usually, by the way, Raj kind of hinted at it, is like service businesses with processes like are obviously like do have a value because it's closer to like a franchise, but even still, it's usually like a 2-3x multiple. It's not and that's on gross, not on net, as where when you actually have a platform and a SaaS and you can build that leverage, is kind of amazing. And I actually have seen this in some of the top lawyer masterminds. At first, it used to, like, I would meet a guy who had this crazy character. There'd be like a hammer or a heavy hitter. There's like the one call, that's all. And they all have these kind of catchy slogans. And then I would go over another state and find out, well, there's a heavy hitter there. And then there's a heavy hitter over there. And I was like, are they all copying each other? And eventually I figured out just from these conversations that one of the lawyers had built up a system based on a character that he played on TV. And he realized that his real enterprise value was that he could license that character to other attorneys who, and for him, he might be only licensed in the state of New York, and he could license it in 49 other states where somebody could take that character. And they often earned far more money and with way more leverage for licensing their IP than they actually ever made, from practicing law and doing cases and doing all the work. And so that's kind of an area of your specialty of like intellectual property. I wonder if you could just share like some kind of like rudimentary thoughts just on our folks, how they can take, hey, I design websites for money and I trade service for dollars, into like really building intellectual property that has sellable value, and how you kind of see like what assets are and what has like real world value that people might pay for.
Yeah, and this is something I'm actually working with a couple of buddies of mine who are agency owners now on doing. It's less scary than you think, because you actually, as an agency owner, have something that software companies really would die to have, which is built-in customers, right? They're all building a product and then running around trying to find a customer. You have existing customers and you understand their pain points and their problems because you're working with them on a services basis. So the first step is to realize what are the common problems that either I have with delivering my service or they have in the marketplace that are causing them to come to you. And that lets you make a package, a services package, which before you make any code or do anything else, you make a services package where you can sell a solution to a customer and you can deploy with a repeated model. So step-by-step systems and processes, Frankie talks about SOPs all the time. It's an SOP-based thing. Once you've SOP'd the business, then you can start to say, okay, where can I turn some of this from human labor into code? And that's the next step in this. And then defining what that needs to look like so that somebody else could use it. So that gets you down that path. And then eventually you get to, okay, I'm actually going to develop a platform. And the fortunate thing, the time that we're living in now, code is so easy to either develop, or if you don't know how to do that, to outsource that development, as long as you've clearly defined the problem. Because if you haven't defined the problem, you're going to build something nobody wants. But again, the good thing is you're in services. Use today's dollars that you're getting paid to develop this thing, because that's how you're building the asset. You have to think about it as more than just I'm doing the work to get paid for the work. I'm doing the work so I can build a platform so every single next customer has a better experience and I have smoother delivery.
Yeah. I was hoping to find Built to Sell, by the way, by John Warlow,
Ah,
but couldn't dig that up. But obviously that's a good introduction to the idea, is that there's a story and a person of the main character. I think his name's Alex, but I could be mistaken on that, who wants to sell his ad design agency and essentially finds out that it's worthless, that nobody will pay anything for it. And as you said, like, it doesn't have to be like get paid today or tomorrow. You can simultaneously do both of these intentions at the same time, so that you're building a real asset in the process, which I think is, by the way, so genius. I love the way your brain works in general. I don't know if I've ever told you that, but I do.
that's it's a little perverse, but yes.
That was actually one of the things that we kind of like talked about in my book, and I think I'm at least I'm the only one that I know that's kind of mentioned this in the agency space. I'm sure there's lots of other people who figured it out as well, but I haven't read it anywhere. The idea that if you start thinking about digital assets, then you can start to think about, like, how can I design a solution that essentially what we're doing, like you mentioned, has leverage in it, where we're doing once and get paid twice. I mean, I had a mentor say that to me so simply one time, as he said, well, buddy, basically, I like to do things that I can do once and get paid for again and again. And it was so geniusly simple when he said it. But I realized, like, at the moment of talking to him, that I didn't have anything that resembled that. It was all like, do work, get paid once. And there was no like long-term repeatability in that. I'd love to hear your thoughts just on a little more on like how you see, like, really anybody could do this kind of scorpion model if you're designing websites, and how you can like kind of narrow that down as to like a real thing that can be deployed, because I don't think most of our folks watching this will be familiar with a company like Scorpion.
Yeah, so think about it this way. Think about it, let's put our customer hat on. If the customer is coming to you, what they want is a solution of some sort, right? They want a website. They might want to connect it to an autoresponder. They might want some marketing automation, but there's a set of things that is in common with all of them, right? And a solution that you can provide might have a different coat of paint on the outside, right? The website might look different. There's going to be different layouts and things like that. But fundamentally, the business problem that they're solving is all the same. So if you start to think, what is the business problem and how am I going to package it? So for instance, I'm going to go and I'm going to work with accountants and I'm going to help them put together a newsletter for long-term nurture, and it's going to be a website. And these are all things you can do with off-the-shelf tools. But if you get really, really good at it, you're going to realize, oh, okay, with accountants, there are actually a set of other things that they might want. Here's a calculator that they could use. Here are some other prepackaged reports that people might be interested in. So you're developing this intellectual property, which is still soft intellectual property, right? It's not like the hardcore stuff that's going to get you the software valuations, but you're starting to think in that way of build once, sell many. And I think that's the first step. And then the second step, or maybe that's a step even before, is realizing that product companies and services companies are valued in completely different ways. Because many people in the agency space are like, ooh, I should start an e-commerce thing. It's so easy. It's right. You're just selling the thing again and again. Now that's got its own challenges, but it's true. We should get inspired by that. Just like when I had a law firm, I was inspired by how cell phone services are billed and metered. And I was thinking, okay, well, can I charge a subscription plan and do things like that? So taking that business model from other things and just realizing that it can be done. It's not going to happen overnight, but what it might take 18 months, might take 2 years, might take 3 years. But I'll tell you one thing, if you don't do this in 3 years, you'll be in exactly the same place you are today, and you won't have an asset for it. So why wouldn't you do this when you're being paid to do it and to really think about the business in a different way?
Yeah, I like that. Thinking about they're all trying to solve the same problem, and yeah, it's a different coat of paint. Because this is one thing that I've kind of talked about is in the beginning, like usually as a service provider, like there's an identity around that, and you think your real value is like I'm solving problems for people. And so I've had people like turn their nose up to me when I tell them just do one thing and do it over and over, and they think, oh well, like I'm not one of those cookie cutter kind of like warehouses where you just we just give you. But what ends up happening is like typically like somebody comes in, wants a website, and there's between all the back and forth, what I call it the client ping pong that it takes to develop that, it's usually 6 months before that website's actually finished and live and the client's completely happy and there's no more like, major changes on it. And, one of the things that we don't realize is when they're buying a solution, like what's more valuable? Like, hey, we're going to talk for 6 months and go back and forth and there's going to be all this custom work, or like, I've already built this for 20 other accountants. It's already working. Like just plug and play it in your business and swipe change 10% of it to personalize what you want to do. And it already works. And we can have it up and running by the end of the day. You'd be amazed that clients don't want custom as much as we think, right?
Right. And not only that, this will elevate your sales game, because when it goes from you trying to pitch your services and just send, okay, here's some examples, go, give me a bunch of referrals, show me some of the work you did, you're a commodity. If instead the sales discussion is about really diving down into their business problem and mapping how you have solved that business problem, and you've got a system for doing so that gives confidence, now your price elasticity goes up. All of a sudden they're willing to pay more because you have a solution that's made for them and you've done it again and again. It wouldn't have value if you hadn't created the thing. So that gives them a lot of confidence and they'll pay more.
Yeah, that's genius. I know you got a hard stop in 3 minutes, so I'd love to just hear your thoughts on just like if folks are interested in learning how to do this for me, like how can they actually work with you?
Yeah, so I'm actually starting a program in order to help folks get from where they are, which is typically services running around with their hair on fire, to an IP-based business. So you can see that at exitscout.com, which is my kind of holding entity, which is I both invest in these companies and also help agencies get to that point. So I'm starting that up and starting the first cohort of that this year. So if you're interested in that, that's a place you can go, exitscout.com.
Yeah, and that's the difference, by the way, just so you guys know, from being worth 0 in 3 years from now and like having a 7-figure valuation just because you thought about solving a problem at scale and being able to repeat it. So like this is not a small kind of discussion, even though like like Raj is a cool guy and we're just having some laughs here at the same time. But like really, I see this over and over and over. People start each year back at 0 because they're not really building an asset. They're doing a sophisticated form of trading time for dollars, which is better than being an employee because at least you own your time and your hours and you have some autonomy about how you do that. But it's not like you're never going to be able to retire doing that. You're still going to have to be 75 years old making AI websites or whatever.
Exactly. Making
Okay.
websites for the AI.
Yeah, exactly. So Raj, I'll make sure to put a link to Exit Scout below this so folks can check that out. And hopefully I can drag you back for some more stuff because you've got some amazing insights on building enterprise value and going after the higher value client and kind of what they're looking for. And I'm sure we could probably do a whole mini series on valuable things.
Yeah, totally. We can do any deep dives that you want. Let's do it.
Hey guys, if you like this video, you'll probably also like our free Facebook group, Beyond Agency Profits, Agency Lifestyle Design. You can get free copies of the book inside here. I look ridiculous. We're doing weekly Q&As, giving answers to all your questions. Some of the best, smartest, brightest people. We've got lots of industry leaders doing 7, 8 figures and beyond. It's a literal who's who of the brightest agency owners that I know, as well as lots of tips on scaling and stuff, books that work. So if you're not already part of it, you're going to want to be part of it. So make sure to click the link. I put it in the description of the video as well as in the pinned top comment below. So just scroll down and you can join and it's totally free.